continuum begins to say, well, maybe we should be careful about certain things because there are populations, for example, who we consider disabled, who don't consider themselves disabled, and they don't want to be, quote, cured. So now we start entering a very shady, shadowy realm of ethics and personal preference that, it's not objective. It's very subjective. There's a group of deaf people who are opposed to the idea of curing deafness because they feel that their disability is somehow part of them and they don't want to be, quote, cured. That from there, we go into things that, are on that borderline between disease and just unusual phenotype. And it just gets harder and harder. And when we get to other things, like being smarter, being more intelligent, frankly, I don't know what intelligence even is. I don't think we have a good measure for intelligence. I know people who sometimes somebody would say they're dumb because they don't do well in math, but they paint beautiful pictures. So what is intelligence? And how do we know so little about the genetics of intelligence? As you said, we're very, very far from that. But if we get closer, do we really know what we're doing? I mean, will we ever know what we're doing? And I'm not sure. I mean, that's really my question. I don't have a very firm position, by the way, on any of this. It's just I have a lot of questions and doubts is really what I'm raising.
Maybe Walter, can you tell us what CRISPR-Cas9 is used for now? What we have used it for? What the limitations are? What we expect it to be able to cure, such as like sickle cell anemia or maybe one day diabetes? Can you kind of give the audience maybe an idea what CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing actually entails?
Mm-hmm. So you've raised a few points. CRISPR-Cas9 is mostly used at the moment on plants, animals, insects, just trying to figure out what we can change. We try to test theories about evolution, and there's a lot of startups actually researching how we can apply this technology to humans, change soma cells. I'm more concerned with changing the germline because this is really where the future lies. The research there is advancing really fast. There's millions of dollars pouring into these projects, and there's new discoveries almost every week. So I'm not up to date, actually, what the current state is there. In regards to health, I wanted to add this point that in my paper, I go to some extent to the view of Julian Savulescu, Guy Kahane. They are professors at Oxford at the Center for the Future of Humanity, and they argue against this common sense notion that we use in daily discourse when we talk about health, that health is some kind of statistical norm or average, what we have in a population. But a statistical norm doesn't necessarily have any normative bearing. What we should really be concerned about is whether something makes life go better. And if you have a definition of health that is related to, a statistical average, then this is entirely arbitrary. So I grant it. There are some communities which are disabled, but they don't want to be considered that. Why? Well, it tells them their life is necessarily worse, right? And that is a separate question of what we consider disease nowadays. And the World Health Organization has a very particular definition of what health is. It's a general state of well-being. And this is what I'm arguing for. We should have a normative definition of health. And then the distinction between health and well-being basically gets eliminated. So we agree we should get rid of diseases. But what I'm saying is there's no distinction between a disease and an enhancement like better eyesight that goes beyond what is normal. Perhaps a better immune system, which goes beyond this average in a society. That doesn't count as curing a disease, according to you. I say there's actually no normative difference. What's your response?
Well, my response is if you can fix the problems with my teeth, which a lot of other people have, I'm entirely on your side because, human teeth are a disaster, and I can testify to that. So I'd love to see that. No, I hear what you're saying, and I think it's very hard to raise an objection to that point of view because why wouldn't it be better if all humans could see better? Didn't have bad backs when they tried to pick something up. I'm speaking a lot from personal experience here. And, could not have their teeth go rotten on them all the time and eat whatever they want. Could change their metabolism so that, sugar is no longer a problem. Lots of good stuff.
Amen.
It sounds great. And how can you argue against that? But you haven't answered my question about variability. The problem is that all of those enhancements, assuming that they're done equally among the whole population, which you agree would be important, all of those enhancements will end up with a human population that's even more genetically homogeneous than it is now. I mean, do you agree with that or not?
Right. To some extent, that is obvious. I'm arguing equality would increase in virtue of eliminating the genetic lottery, which is responsible for a lot of difference in success.
Sure.
However, having these equal genes, having a society of people who are almost entirely equal in their genetic code, that's not necessarily the best way to lead a good life in a society, right? So suppose you live in a society where all males, at least, and all females, they are almost clones of each other. But we have a market and we fulfill specific roles. There's division of work. And depending on what is needed right now in a society, depending on the environment, different skills might make your life go much better. If everyone has the ability to become an athlete, there's really no point in boosting your fitness level to a point which would have trade-offs with other abilities, such as intelligence, perhaps, right? So I think a lot of this worry can be discerned by just pointing out that in virtue of having a market and different skills that are necessary for different jobs, well, we will have some variation. Is it enough for your worry? Maybe not. But that depends on how far the research goes. And I don't think we will ever reach the point where we create this, Star Wars clone trooper army, where we have the perfect soldiers, right? I don't think that's very likely, but I think that's what comes to mind when people think of genetic engineering. We don't want to have a Star Wars clone trooper army. We don't want it. That seems to be... maybe that's yeah.
Well, I agree with you that I don't want that either. I don't think anybody here does. But the question is, once this approach is starting to be used, it can be used by anybody, anywhere, for whatever purpose they want. And there are maybe people in this world who would love to have a clone army, who would love to have a population where, let's say, just to throw out an example, the men are all strong, brave, not too smart, great soldiers, and, the women all love them so that, everybody's happy. But it's a warrior society, and I don't know how great that would be, frankly. So right. I guess what I'm worried about, I mean, what I'm coming across as, and deliberately, is somebody who's a little worried about this approach, more than a little worried, a lot worried, partially because of the evolutionary problem of having a more homogeneous population, but there are other reasons too. And one of them is the potential for misuse, which I've only touched on one of. I'm sure everybody can think of a few examples of where some society might decide to genetically engineer people to, quote, improve, where their definition of improvement is far from what any of us would agree is an improvement.
Right. So now, without mentioning the term, we've entered the area of eugenics, right? So
exactly.
the state decides, well, this particular set of genes is just better and other sets need to be eliminated. So the question is, what's the difference to what the Nazis have been doing, right? So some people in this debate don't even want to mention the term eugenics because it's very heavily loaded with this historical baggage. Right. Can you even make a distinction here? There's a paper called liberal eugenics, which seems to be almost, well, an oxymoron of terms. No. Well, this is a decision for parents. This has nothing to do with the state. Perhaps in practice, this will to some extent influence each other. After all, if parents are obligated to use this technology, the state perhaps has some incentive to at least advertise the usage of this technology, just like what we do with vaccines, right? Parents seemingly are obligated to make their children undergo this procedure of vaccinating them against several diseases. Some parents don't. The state doesn't force them to do them. Perhaps he should do that. But the state at least advertises the usage of that. So,
well, that's a very interesting example, because what happened, at least in this country and also in Great Britain, as far as I know, was after the hysteria of anti-vaccination spread, thanks to some actresses and public figures who were believing a fraudulent scientist who actually has now been barred from practicing medicine and doing science, Andrew Wakefield, if I remember that's the name. By believing him, we had a big problem with people deciding not to vaccinate their children on their own. The state took a hand because that is a public health danger. In other words, when you send kids to school unvaccinated, you are endangering all the children. And in fact, there were big measles outbreaks here and in Great Britain, and I believe in some other places in Europe, but I don't remember the details. And so the state, and in terms of local school boards, began saying, no, you can't bring your kid to school unless you show they're vaccinated. So when you get to the point where parents make decisions that are not only bad for their own kids, but bad for the public health, they don't get to do that. They're not allowed to do that. The state will come in and say, sorry, you're endangering the lives of everyone else's kids. You can't send your kid to school unless they're vaccinated. So at some point, the state very likely could come in. And now this is the example I gave is one where I'm in favor of the state coming in, obviously, because I'm a public health advocate. But you could also reverse it. You could have a state that is not so careful about the public health of people, but decide, yes, you will produce a soldier. That's the law of this land. And that soldier will, do what we tell him to do. So how do you now, let me just, before I say anything else, I actually would like to stop because Steve and Kyle, this conversation is actually no longer very technical or scientific. We're really talking about ethical, philosophical, moral. Yeah. So you guys should jump in with comments and questions because, this is we're not talking about the details of CRISPR anymore. We're talking about,
we do have a lot of questions. We do have a lot of questions coming from the live chat. And once you guys,
that would be good.
Wind down from your talk, we'll ask you guys the questions. But right now you guys are doing, I'm fascinated. This is actually, I can keep up with it a lot better than I thought. So I like the direction that it's going in.
I like the idea. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I like the idea of bringing other people in because I'm not a philosopher. I know a little bit about this. I have some ideas, but I haven't studied it. And Walter, has some very strong and specific ideas. So I've asked them a few questions, but I think it would be good to hear from other people as well.